Now, Namaskar. I'm very sorry that we are slightly delayed on this thing. My hands are a little rusty, and it is the first time that I'm doing it alone, although Anuji and Srikanji have helped me out. So, welcome to Pragya Pravah channel. My name is Heeraman Tiwari, and I teach at the Center for Historical Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Let me begin by telling you all why and how I have chosen this topic for today's discussion. One of the major debates that have been going on in India for the past 200 years at least, especially since the Europeans, the British and the Germans in particular, began to take interest in India and to study India's culture, history, literature, and philosophy, not to mention the religious practices, has been whether there was a scientific temper in Indian knowledge system, or particularly in ancient India, and whether the Indians have devised a method to manage their knowledge system at all. Many Europeans, even American scholars, learned Sanskrit and began to read and write about India. But they were always conditioned in their mind to study India from a European eye, from a Western eye. The reason why I say with a European eye is because ancient India surprised them, bewildered them even with its deep and complex and rich systems of knowledge. It defied Western stereotype, Western silo, so to speak, in arranging and disseminating knowledge systems that they were hoping for. They even began to wonder whether India had its own knowledge system at all. To dwell on all these points seriously will require a different topic, even a different comparative structure of debate. So I will nonetheless touch upon these points as I go along. But I have planned to structure today's discussion on the following 4 points. I hasten to add, however, that they are not by any means the final or the only structures to discuss ancient Indian process of producing and arranging knowledge. They are how I like to proceed with such topics. And the 4 points that I'm going to discuss today are around which I will concentrate on my discussion are: number 1, Anvikshiki. The terms might sound a little foreign to you because they are Sanskrit, but I will explain to them gradually. The second is Sutra, and the third is Vada, and the fourth is memory. Let us part with these thoughts and 4 points. And there is one more point which I quickly wish to arrest here before I plunge into my discussion further. And that is how Indians responded to the meta-knowledge. If you understand, meta-knowledge will be knowledge about knowledge. That is Europeans' knowledge. And then whatever they are talking about India, that will be, to me, a meta-knowledge produced by European thinkers in the past 2 or more centuries, perhaps 3 centuries. We know that Europeans were already navigating their knowledge system, traditional knowledge system, with the arrival of new or scientific world order. And so, when they encountered Indian texts and knowledge communicated through them, they reacted to ancient India in 2 different ways. One carried an abundant caution, even suspicion. The other invoked a nervous rendezvous with a hitherto unknown landscape. It is under these 2 different emotions and intellectual responses that the ancient India began to be interpreted, in some cases explained, away by the Europeans. I shall leave this topic here for some other occasion and come to our main point. And I shall begin then with a little story which is available in many ancient texts of India and has often been narrated to underline the desire of man to seek immortality in this world. It has also traveled to medieval Europe and has even undergone metamorphosis. However, let me quickly also add that this story in no way compares with the fine conversation with which the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad begins, where Maitreyi asks her wise husband and teacher Yajnavalkya. And she says, and I quote, "If this entire earth filled with wealth were mine, would I be immortal?" "No," replies the sage. "If it were so, your life will be like the lives of the rich. Of mortality, however, there is no hope through prosperity and wealth." Maitreyi then asks Yajnavalkya, and I quote, "What should I do with that which could not make me immortal?" Now, this is the desire of a human being around which the knowledge systems will be created to remain immortal, perhaps in this life. Let me leave this conversation here for a moment and come to the story I had promised you a moment ago. I'll quickly summarize the story and then I'll come back to it again. A man burdened with poverty left his home for other lands in the hope of escaping his misery. He lost his way, found himself all alone in a forest. Presently, he saw a mad elephant charge at him. Scared, the man ran only to encounter an evil demoness before him, eyes bulging, cackling with laughter. The man looked around in terror, hoping to find some escape. He saw a massive banyan tree to the east. With all his might, the man ran towards the tree, but he couldn't scale its trunks. Just as all hope was lost, he spotted a well on the ground, covered with grass. Without a moment's loss, he jumped into the well and clung on to some vine growing on the walls of the well. For the well was dry and full of snakes. At the bottom of the well, there lay a big black python. The man knew that as long as the reeds held fast, he would survive. At this moment, two rats appeared, one black and the other white, and began gnawing at the base of the very reed the man held on to for his dear life. As all this unfolded, the elephant, maddened further by the wretched man's escape, rammed into the banyan tree in his fury and caused a beehive to be knocked loose and fall into the well. The beehive crashed into the man, held on to the vine in agony. Suddenly, a drop of honey rolled off his forehead, then onto his lips. All his pain and fear vanished. The man forgot the elephant, the demoness, or even the snakes. All he yearned now was for more honey. Now, I know you would be wondering what is the relevance of this story. If you're thinking as I speak along, you will discover what the relevance of this story is. The relevance is almost similar to the relevance of the question of Maitreyi to Yajnavalkya. What is it that gets us immortality? The desire to seek longevity or immortality in life. Let us hold on, therefore, to this little tale and think, how can one look for an ultimate relief? One source would be to have good things in life and ignore the pain. But the fundamental yearning of the self has been to become free from all desire. That is at least what ancient Indian texts will tell us. In ancient Indian, knowledge system invests most of its energy in producing knowledge through which suffering can be erased. And suffering can be erased for good, that is. So let us get back to our 4 points I mentioned in the beginning. You will also notice that there is leitmotif that runs through these 4 points around which I have designed my discussion. The first point was Anvikshiki, otherwise known also as darshan. Anvikshiki appears very prominently in the Arthashastra of Kautilya, where it simply means that you go after knowledge, you seek it, you clarify it, and you feel satisfied by it. So both these terms, Anvikshiki and Darshana, Darshan, of course, is a point of view from the root Trish. A point of view, not necessarily just a point of view, but in ancient Indian context, in the ancient Indian knowledge context, it is a point of view that is arrived at scientifically. That's what Darshana would mean. Anvikshiki is the process of arriving at it scientifically. All the interpreters of India, or ancient India in particular, have used Darshana, or the other word that is used as Mata. There is so much reference that one can give. Pick up any great commentator, whether it is Patsyayana, whether it is Udyotakara, whether it is Vachaspati, whether it is Shankaracharya, or any non-Brahmanical interpreters like the Buddhists and Jains, you will discover this term Mata and Darshana, which simply means a point of view which must lead us through scientific search to a particular point which we are looking for. Now, to preserve this and to manage this knowledge that I just mentioned briefly, whether received from the Vedic texts, such as the Aranyakas or the Upanishads, or from the Sutra treatises, were based on two foundations of logical reasoning. One is, of course, simply interpretation, and I shall discuss this in greater detail. I also call it elucidative conversation, or as it is called in other genre, vachana, something which has a meaning, which has a purpose of meaning in life. And the second is debate. These are the two axes around which the knowledge system is based. So let us look at what this knowledge system then requires for it to be achieved in ancient India. One of the major discoveries or contributions of ancient India, which I think is unique in the world, is Sutra. What is a Sutra? If you just look at the definition of Sutra, couple of definitions I'll give you here, which is Sutra is Swalpaksharam, Asandigdham, Saravat, Vishwatomukham. Something which can be written in as few words and letters as possible. Swalpakshara. Asandigdha. It should have no doubt at all in terms of meaning. And Saravat, that is meaning Vishwatomukham. It should be applied within its domain without being impeded by any other counter knowledge. So remember this word counter knowledge also. The other definition is Laghuni Suchitartha, something which is in very few words. So Sutra therefore means using as few letters, as few even syllables to compress the knowledge. And it is the process of decompressing that knowledge which I call the knowledge system, production of knowledge system in ancient India. They're also known as aphorisms. So aphorisms can be, or sutras can be, called a capsule of knowledge where the knowledge is compressed. How is it compressed? It is compressed by debates and discussions, as I mentioned, commenting and debating in a group. And they are arranged in a particular group. Therefore, you have multiple sutras. It doesn't mean that you carry on speaking and using and uttering the sutra and the knowledge will appear. Sutras must be arranged in what is known as a prakarana, as a context. So each text, whether it is a Brahma Sutra, whether it is a Vimamsa Sutra, whether it is a Naya Sutra, whether it is a Vaisheshik Sutra, whether it is Yoga Sutras, or even Kapila's Sankhya Sutras, which are not available, and I'll discuss what happens when sutras are somehow dispensed with or not available, what replaces them. So sutra therefore becomes a very basis from where the knowledge can be derived. And this sutra system comes, as I mentioned earlier, after the Upanishadic system. But even during the Upanishadic system of knowledge, or generating knowledge, producing knowledge, or compressing knowledge, there was always a premium put on the what is called economy or brevity of efforts. Now, so the relationship, therefore, between the various prakaranas, various sections, and one prakarana will talk about one particular aspect of that thesis. And then this relationship is called sangati, that it is interconnected from one to the other. Each prakarana will contain an objective. So we do pick up any text of sutras before it is a commentary, or maybe the commentators have devised in such a way that they are somehow divided into prakaranas. And that objective is called nothing but meaning. So what is the meaning? Meaning is what is called abhidheya, what is proposed to be communicated through a particular sutra. But sutra therefore needs to be decompressed, or as it is normally called in modern language, unpacked. And that unpacking is called, in general terms, commentary, which is where I'm coming now. So in the first part of the four, sutra, where you need to unpack the meaning, but how did the meaning get decompressed or compressed in it in the first place before being decompressed? The compression of the meaning happens when you have a particular acharya who is well versed in the system, and then he has disciples or the audience with whom they are discussing. So sutra therefore can also become a code word, and therefore it must be in as few letters, as few words as possible. You do have sutras which are more than 4 or 5 words, but as I said, pick up any text, including the great Paninian grammar, where you have Panini's Ashtadhyayi, all the sutras of Vyakarana. They are all divided into various prakaranas according to the sangati, according to the context. So therefore, each prakarana would have a meaning, and therefore each sutra, when it is decompressed, when it is unpacked, when it is opened up through a commentating system, it gives a clarity of knowledge. But it also must have, and this is, I'm talking about how the systems were devised in the ancient period. It must have, each time you compress a knowledge in a sutra system after the period of the Upanishads, whatever the reasons, it could be just a style, it could be just a mastery of ancient Indian seers and scholars who had devised this beautiful system of sutra. Nowhere in the world have I read such a system where entire knowledge can be compressed in a few number of sutras. And the moment the sutras are uttered, it seems that the knowledge is dancing around, the meaning is dancing around you. But of course, for that, you need a proper system to understand it. You need a teacher, you need an acharya. Prayojana, of course, is the acquisition of knowledge, as I began in the beginning. What is it that gets us to the level of immortality? Almost each philosophical text I'm talking about, or philosophical sutras, they say once you know it all, then all the lack of knowledge or the darkness is removed. Once the darkness is moved, then there is no fear from mortality. That's what would be one meaning of immortality. So prayojana therefore is acquisition of knowledge. When you acquire knowledge, when you contain it, and then you can become an acharya and then again compress knowledge and prepare the sutra. But let us stick to the traditional system of ancient India. The second part is in the sutra. How do we unpack the sutra after arranging them? It's called Vartika. Vartika is a little longish elucidation of a particular sutra, which might contain a short elucidation, not necessarily a very long one. I'll come to the next point, what is called the long one. Or you can also call it a window of knowledge. So Vartika somehow opens a little window and a gush of air comes in. Therefore, a meaning is explained a little more. And that is the task of the master, of the commentator, or anybody who has learned that art of compressing and decompressing, how to open your zip file, for example, how to click on a file and suddenly pages and pages after pages open up. This is what the sutra is. And this, I believe, I'm not going to make any comment about the idea of computer language. I'm only saying that the sutra is a very unique and very unique to India and ancient India, where the knowledge was stored and produced. I also, as I said, I called it capsule. Bhartihari later on calls it spota. You just need a detonator in the form of a teacher, in the form of an informed person who opens up, and then the blast happens. And when the blast happens, all the light emerges out of it. Vartika could also therefore have. So the sutra allows the person who unpacks the meaning, who decompresses the meaning, to have an alternative view, not necessarily a counter view, but alternative meaning. Because after all, it is the imagination and the minds which are reading the text or the knowledge system along in a group, in a class, in a pathshala, in a toll, along with a teacher and along with an expert. And then you can question them. Therefore, there is no time, perhaps we can have another system, how there have been multiple systems of traditions within one tradition, within one school, where the teacher, the student has fully disagreed with the teacher, and the teacher acknowledges that difference. So Vartika, therefore, would also allow you to have an alternative view. What is then? What does Vartika do? It says ukta nukta duruktanam chinta, where you need to ruminate or think about what is to be said while decompressing, while unpacking the meaning of the sutra, and what is unsaid in the sutra, what needs to be brought in, anukta. And durukta is something that might have been explained, which was not desirable, which was not appropriate, which was not good enough for that. So ukta nukta durukta chinta, where you think about it. And therefore, this I'm coming on from the sutra to the commentary style, where you begin to unpack. So you go back in a rolling manner, where you sutra and then commentary and the knowledge opens up. By this way, of course, when I come to the fourth point, I'll tell you these all are acting or active in the process of unpacking the knowledge from the sutra, from the text. Let us call them. They are texts anyway, but what kind of text? And which is, I said, that sutra is a very unique text which no other system in the world has managed to develop. And it is unique in the sense that it has never really given way to something that it corrupts. It can only generate further knowledge. So this is commentary also allows it, and which is why I said that you have people who are listening to the commentary from an expert, from an acharya, and there is somebody listening in the audience and giving an alternative view, or rather amplifying the meaning. So Vartika includes somebody else's view, and that is how you begin to somehow expand the commentary. Excuse me. In one sense, this is nothing but a reflection on ideas expressed in the sutras. Now, perhaps a few hundred years ago, the sutras were composed. The acharyas who understood the sutras, that they should be understood. And then a few hundred years later come other acharyas who have mastered the art, and then they bring in other meaning, and that is why anukta, something that is left unsaid, that should be said. And I'll quickly later on tell you, therefore, you find in the India system, particularly in philosophical system, but in any other system, you go to Kavya Shastra, you go to the elucidation of literary writings, how to write. everywhere you will find multiple views being brought in through the commentary. So sutra, therefore, is necessarily a companion to the commentary and the vice versa. Now, there are other terms that are used in ancient India, and they are very unique to how the sutra should be interpreted or the meaning should be unpacked in sutra. The another is vritti, which is a short commentary. Vartika is a longish sutra, if you say, quite a few words. Vritti is maybe a couple of sentences or little, say, 20 odd words where things need to be explained. Now you could see as the time developed, as people began to read the sutras and get the meaning, more and more and more commentarial system is being developed. And that commentarial system enriched the knowledge system that was being produced. So, for example, you had small vrittis by certain commentators who thought, and all of them had a different level of understanding. So somebody say undergraduate or even below that, or graduate or advanced. So all these things will also therefore be required. A sutra perhaps is good enough for somebody who is an absolute expert. The more process of getting that kind of graduation, it is for them that vritti and vartika are important. Now, the third and most important part of really producing knowledge in ancient India would come under the commentary, and everybody knows it. It's called bhashya. Now, bhashya is an absolute amplification of the meaning of a sutra. Why do I say that? You pick up any treatise and you'll discover that bhashya is something that produces a nibandha, a system in itself. So if I give you an example, say, of Shabara Bhashya, of Mimamsa philosophy, or say Shankaracharya's Bhashya, everybody mentions it, or all the systems of, say, Vedanta philosophy, where everybody writes. After Shankaracharya, the most famous Bhashyakaras Kara would be the Vaishnava Bhashyakara, that is Ramanujacharya. Then you have Madhvacharya. Then you have many other systems, and they just change the name of Vedanta a little, and somebody called it Advaita Vedanta, somebody called it Dvaita Advaita Vedanta, somebody called it Vishishta Advaita Vedanta. And this is what I mentioned a while ago, that when certain additional points of view of a great mind is brought in, that's how the meaning begins to unpack in multiple colors and multiple ways. For example, even let us pick up one system, say Naya Sutras. Now, Naya Sutras, the first major commentary, Bhashya rather, comes from Gautama. Then you have later on Udyotakara in the 4th century. Udyotakara is one of the greatest philosophers of Nyaya philosophy, Nyaya Darshan, simply because he brought in so many other things. Why does he do that? Because he's also looking at those who may not agree completely with the system, but yet are engaging with them. So in order to accommodate their views and enrich the theory, they will write a particular commentary. So Udyotakara will write a Nyaya Vartika, a commentary nevertheless called Vartika. So there is an elasticity in a particular nomenclature, where Vartika therefore includes, as I said earlier, Ukta, Anukta and Durukta. What has been said, what should have been said, and what should not have been said, all should be assimilated in a commentary. The other word, when you write a commentary, of course, then you have Mahabhashya. And that simply, Mahabhashya simply means there is nothing more to be said after that. So you have the one great Mahabhashya. Shankaracharya, some people call it is Mahabhashya, but you have only one great Mahabhashya, which is Patanjali's Mahabhashya of Panini's Sutras of Grammar, Sanskrit Grammar. But that there is nothing more to be said. It is just there. It has been established after centuries of great efforts of various minds. The system that you establish, you either call it a prabandha, as is a textbook, which will then be established like a Shankara Vedanta, Madhvacharya's Vedanta, Vishishtadvait of Ramanujacharya, and then many others later on, well into the medieval period. However, the system that is in collective terms called, and Shankaracharya also uses, is called Tantra. That is my system, and which is why I said the knowledge system. That Tantra, and Tantra simply means a web of various ideas, warp, if you like. So that Tantra then establishes a complete, comprehensive interpretation, elucidation, amplification of the meaning that is given in a sutra. Now, many scholars, as I said, once the text begins to be unpacked, or text in this context, let's say the sutras, if we begin from there, it begins to be unpacked, it goes into various directions, and it can create, as necessarily almost every school has done, that is, the Vedanta Sutras have multiple shakhas or branches of Vedanta. Similarly, Mimamsa became at least two, maybe more systems later on. Kumarila Mimamsa and Prabhakara Mimamsa much later. And there you find the system somehow branching out. Not necessarily, it is like a beautiful tree where multiple branches are going out. Each branch may have beautiful singing birds on it. The singing or the tune may be different, but they're all sitting on the same tree, which is why there is a Upanishad, a Sutra or mantra, which is often quoted by many people, and it is also available in the Rig Veda. It's called Dvasuparna Sayuja Sakaya Samanam Vriksham Parishasvajate Tayor Ekaha Pippalam Swadavati Anashnan Nanyo Vichakashiti. Two birds, very close friends, Dva, Suparna, Sayuja, together, never to be left alone, any of them. Sakhaya, they're great friends. Samanam Vriksham Parishasvajate, where they perch on the same tree. Tayoho Ekaha Pippalam Swadavati. Out of the two, only one of them is enjoying the fruit of the tree while the other is watching. Anashnan Anya Abhichakashiti, just simply sits and watches. Of course, this mantra is always explained in the terms that one is a jiva, the other is a Brahman. The Brahman is absolutely unattracted to the fruit, but cannot leave the jiva, or cannot leave the desire to watch the jiva enjoy the fruit. Now, this is the beginning of the Vedanta philosophy. Nevertheless, as I said, you have the same branch, the multiple branches of the same tree. So the trunk is the same. This is how, if you collect all the knowledge system together, whether you read, say, Chanakya's, Kautilya's Arthashastra, you'll discover how he describes Anvikshiki. Anvikshiki will be something that is thoroughly investigated and gone after. And the more and more scientific way that you interpret a particular text, that produces a nibandha, a system, or even what is called a huge prakarana. Some scholars, of course, when they further wrote a commentary, they gave various other names which are very, very useful in terms of the meaning. They're called pradeepa, lamp. As if in the dark you need to read something, you need the lamp. So pradeep is all what? An aid to the knowledge. So you have a commentary, but you want a sub-commentary or meta-commentary to explain it further. Depends on multiple things. One could be easy on the level of knowledge that one has. The other could be just for sheer capacity of that particular tradition where it could be interpreted. We have been talking much about in last 7, 8 decades or 9 decades about deconstruction. Here you have a beautiful system, and system is all joined together. Important factor in the production of knowledge is that you should not confuse. I hope I'm not confusing you. That is one thing that I'm trying to do. So that knowledge system, which can branch out in multiple ways, but should never confuse you. So deconstruction in the West became a wonderful tool where people began to say the death of the author. You have a couple of articles. I won't mention them here, but I do in my professional work discuss them. The death of Sanskrit, for that matter. That's a totally different topic. We can discuss what these two scholars have written some other time. But the whole idea, therefore, is that you just shun the author. The author is irrelevant in the deconstruction theory of the West, particularly France and in the English-speaking world afterwards, where you can meaning that you want. That is what deconstruction is. So therefore, the author is dead, is gone, because you are tied to it, you are tethered to it, you are fettered by it. You to the system not exist without the other. You can have completely different meaning, but you cannot simply shun it, kill the origin of that meaning. So, Pradeep, therefore, a lamp, an aid, again, commentary, everything is open, everything is sentences in such a way that the meaning is not Paksha. Generally, in English, translated rather unhappily, opponent. Not necessarily. There is nobody an opponent. They are all struggling to get to the correct meaning. But nevertheless, in order to get the meaning clear, they ask uncomfortable questions. If while writing or elucidating or talking, you can accommodate the possible question that could be raised, and that makes it a very good commentary. So that is called Vyutpatti Vishleshana. And then the final is Vakyartha Nirnaya. This is the process of that you have arrived to the correct meaning of a particular sentence, of a particular word, of a particular passage. So you establish the meaning, and that establishment could be Shankaracharya, Shankara Vedanta, or Sri Bhashya is Ramanujacharya's, there's a Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, Dvaitadvaita, Bheda Bhed, multiple kinds of. Similarly, you will have in other systems like Nyaya, like Vaisheshik, like Sankhya, like Yoga, multiple traditions which are rivulets that are coming out, but not necessarily. The source cannot be blocked. Otherwise, the rivulet will get dry. Unlike, as I said, the deconstruction system of the West. You can have a water without the source being there. In Indian knowledge, Vada, the debate is extremely important. Quickly, let me tell you, we are coming to some 44 odd minutes. Quickly, there are three different kinds of debates that Nyaya system and grammatical and Mimamsa systems have appreciated. One is simply called a respectable debate, where the appropriate true meaning, true objective has to be sought. By the way, we are all seekers. Indian system of knowledge asks us to seek, not to pontificate, not to give it, but constantly to seek. Therefore, each acharya who writes a commentary is never a closed book. It may be a massive book, but there are questions that are raised. So therefore, seeking is something which is constantly encouraged in the Indian knowledge system. From Sutra to Mahabhashya, as we briefly, so I'm sorry, it is not a very satisfactory one. I wanted to compress so many things in a very short time, but I'm focusing on what I call the debate, the Vada. So you have Vada, which is a respectable debate. Both you and I may be having a different point of view on a particular meaning, but eventually through dialogue, through proper means, and of course, Naya system has established a beautiful system of debate through its pramanas, that is pratyaksha, anuman, etc. And so that is called Vada. The second part is called Jalpa. In Jalpa, the objective is not to get to the right meaning. The objective is to defeat your opponent with whom you are discussing. That point, so that you want to clinch a point, even if you have to use a wrong means, or even if you use a right means, but your objective is not to get the correct meaning, but your opponent must face defeat, or the vice versa. And the third, which is called the worst kind of debate, it is called Vitanda. Neither of the parties is interested in getting either the correct meaning or my meaning, one side meaning. The objective is only just to accuse others that you know nothing. Nyaya says, Mimamsa says, it is the Vada which has been the foundation of the system of knowledge in India. Now, briefly, I will tell you why I mentioned the fourth, which is memory or smriti. It is through the memory, just as Sutra would have a memory, when you decompress it, all the memory which is there will open up. Memory is constantly working. This is somehow diving back into the past and getting the meaning out. Memory is a direct relation between now and the ancient past. Just as the commentary is directly connected, I mentioned, and I'm repeating it perhaps third or fourth time, that there is no system in India where you can cut yourself off completely from the past or create a new system. Once you do that, you will see it will shake. It will not stand for a long time. No matter how many changes you bring in, no matter how much novelty you bring in, of course, there is a celebration of Kshane Kshane Yan Navatam Upaiti Tadeva Rupam Ramaniyataya. Every time you read certain things, every time you listen to something, it sounds new. That's not the new meaning. It's the novelty, a new additional meaning that you are getting into it. My supervisor, Professor Bimal Krishna Matilal, had once said to me in Oxford that don't give up taking a trip to the past. People say taking a trip, what is there in ancient India? But do not give up taking your trip to the past. It is possible that you take trip and you are not getting anything new. But one thing is absolutely certain, that each time you make a trip to the past, you will get a new cartography. The landscape will be slightly different because you live in a different landscape. So therefore, memory is something which dives back into the past, that is in a general sense, but in a very technical sense, it is through memory that we can verbalize our knowledge. That I cannot say that I'm speaking to you unless I remember what I was supposed to do. I cannot say this is a laptop in front of me unless I use the source of memory. So the memory is therefore what is called samskara. Sanskara janyam jnanam smriti. Smriti is that something that comes out from the memory impressions of the past. Some people call it smell of the past. Thank you very much.